Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by HelloFresh.com, and we thank them for their support. Receive $30 off your first week of deliveries when you go to HelloFresh.com and use the offer code Campfire30. That's HelloFresh.com and use that offer code Campfire30. Thanks, HelloFresh. The Campfire is also brought to you by the Campfire Cruise. Join me in the summer of 2018 on a cruise to the Bahamas full of ghost stories, a live campfire show recording, and a lot more fun. Get the details at campfirecruise.com. That is campfirecruise.com. Check it out today. And thanks, Holiday Maker Travel.
Welcome to our gathering tonight. Here we share stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things. Sit back, relax, and warm yourself by Jim Harold's Campfire.
Welcome to the Campfire. I am Jim Harold. So glad to be with you, and Happy New Year, everybody. We took a couple of weeks off to spend some time with the family, and that was a lot of fun, but we are raring to go, and we're back here at the Campfire. We're not going to delay. Campfire stories right ahead.
iPhone and iPad users, help us keep the Campfire at the top of the charts. Go into your Apple Podcasts app right now and hit subscribe. We appreciate it. Now on to the show.
Becca is on the line from Massachusetts, and boy, does she have a doozy of a story. She's been listening for a few years. She went out looking for paranormal stories, and here she landed, and we're so glad she did. Becca, welcome to the show, and tell us what happened.
Well, hi, Jim, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, so my story started back in 2004. I should preface by saying that I am what my friends like to refer to as spooky.
Me too.
I tend to have a lot of paranormal experiences, but this one really kind of stuck out in my mind as more of a two-parter. So this story brings me back to 2004 in a Revolutionary War cemetery that my friends and myself had frequented quite a few times, and there had been a lot of recent building in the area, a lot of disruption of ground, so we decided to kind of go up and check it out. We tried to always be very respectful, no electronics, no cameras, no phones, nothing of that nature, in order to, respect their resting places. We had even so much so, had a vehicle up there once before, and the vehicle just did not want to turn back over when we were finished our excursion. So, we decided to play it safe. This particular night, it was in the fall. It was very, very quiet. There was no wind, no animals, no noises. So it was very, very silent and very still. And we decided to just pick a random stone in the very front of the graveyard. We didn't want to venture too far. And we found a stone with the name the same as mine. Her name was Rebecca. And so we said, okay, this sounds like a good idea. And we formed, kind of a semicircle in front of her stone and sat quietly and joined hands and just asked her to present herself. We just wanted to say hello, and we were curious. So we gave it a few moments, and, it started to get a little bit more active. The wind picked up a little bit. We started to hear sounds around us in the forest. And after a few moments, I started to feel a little bit of activity behind me, and out of nowhere, a very cold pair of hands rested on my shoulders. Ooh. And thinking it was one of my friends playing a joke on me, I popped my head up to look up behind me, and I saw her. It was this very clear apparition standing straight above me.
Wow.
Yes, it was a woman. She was completely see-through, Jim. I could remember seeing the trees behind her, looking up at her, and she seemed very young. She looked like she had long ringlets of hair covering her face. But what I remember the most about her was her eyes. They were completely black, completely devoid of anything, blacker than the night around her.
Wow.
And I'm sitting here just in complete disbelief, staring above me, and she opened her mouth as if to say something, and I just absolutely freaked out. I jumped and I ran. I took off all the way down the street screaming, and I could hear my friends, calling for me, but there was just no way I was turning back around. And I ran all the way to the very end of that street. I could still feel the coldness on the back of my neck until I got all the way to the end of that road. And my friends came running after me because they had no idea what had happened. They did not see her. But they did remark to me that as I was running down the road, they saw, a white wisp behind me, similar in fashion to if I had been wearing a cape.
Oh,
and
man.
As I ran, down that road, Jim, I could hear her giggling, almost laughing in my ear, almost joking with me, making fun of me. Ha ha, I got you. This is what you asked for. So that stuck with me for quite some time, and we never went back as the group of us after that. That was pretty much it. I kind of refused to play that game again. And long story short, I didn't think about this for the longest time until about 3 months ago. I woke up one day, Jim, out of absolutely nowhere, and I said to my husband, I need to go visit this gravestone. I don't know why. It's been 14 years. But I really feel the need to go. Mm-hmm. So I did. I ventured over about the hour drive, and I was very nervous. I wasn't sure, what I should expect, but I just felt compelled to visit this graveyard. So I parked my car all the way at the end of the street, and I walked down in complete silence by myself. And of course, her stone was where it always had been, undisturbed. And so I stood in front of her grave, and Jim, I was standing there on the 194th anniversary of her death to the day.
Oh, man. That day, just the day that for some reason you got the feeling you had to go, it was the 194th anniversary of his death. That's weird.
It was. And so, of course, out of nowhere, I'm standing under this beautiful oak tree, and all of these acorns just start pummeling the ground around me. Not a single one of them touched me, but they just pooled at my feet, hundreds of them. And out of nowhere, I felt ever so gently what felt to be someone touching the back of my head, almost as if someone standing in front of you had reached around and, in a loving gesture, cupped the back of your head as if to say, welcome. It's been so long since I've seen you.
Wow. What a story. Wow. That's, you're one of our first callers of the new year. And I've got to say, so far, this is my favorite story of 2018.
Oh, well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that.
That's a great story. That's a fantastic one. Well, we thank you so much for calling. And I'm guessing that obviously this hasn't scared you away from the paranormal. It sounds like maybe it's even deepened your interest.
It certainly has. You're very correct. I've had many a paranormal experience in my time, and this definitely heightened my senses and almost made me crave a little bit more.
Very good. Well, Becca, thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year, and please come back and tell us more of these great stories.
Thank you so much, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Allison is on the line. She actually discovered the show while camping with some friends, which I can't think of a more appropriate time or place. And hey, if you're out there camping and have campfires going, please fire up the Bluetooth speaker and share a campfire episode, and then I'm sure people will have their own campfire stories that they can share. I think that's a great idea. Also, Allison is a member of our virtual campfire group where she told her story, and now she's coming here to the Campfire Podcast to share it as well. Allison, welcome. A very, I'll say it, a poignant story. Please tell us what happened.
Okay, so I was having some health issues. and I got really tired of going through circles with all my doctors, so I decided I would try an herbalist. I've never done this before, so I thought it would at least be interesting, nothing to lose, you know? So,
Sure.
I made an appointment with her, and I went, this was last month sometime, and so we had our little session, and she gave me some herbs to try, and at one point during our session, she asked me if I felt like I was an intuitive person, and I sat there and watched her arm hair stand on end and watch her get goosebumps, and she just kind of shook and said, "Ooh, I got goosebumps." And I said, I explained to her that I had lost my father in June, and we were always really close. Every time something happened with him where he was in the hospital or he got really sick and, of course, didn't tell anybody, I would feel it coming. And so I felt like I was intuitive in that way. We just were very connected.
Right.
And I felt the opportunity to ask her about what she thought about visitation dreams. And we shared some stories together, and that was really nice. I've had visitation dreams since I was really young, since the first person that I was close to has died. So I got her aspect on that, and that was neat. And she she said to me, she said, sometimes when you don't feel them around, you ask God to protect you, and then ask your loved one to come through somehow and in some way that you would recognize. And so we went along with our session. We talked a little bit longer, and it was time for me to leave. And I went out to my car and rolled the windows down. And all of a sudden there was a big gust of wind, and I smelled my dad's cologne. And it was just so strong that it smelled like someone was in the car spraying it, which was something that he did all the time. Every time we went somewhere,
Yeah.
he would spray his car before we went in. And it just threw me back, because I've never had an experience so blatant. Like, this is what is happening. There's no explanation. I don't know. I've had a lot of weird experiences, but there's no obvious explanation. You can just rule it out and be like, okay, well, that was this and that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of actually the most obvious explanation to me is it was your dad and he was giving you some kind of a sign.
Right. And I felt like it was a very comforting sign of him just saying, hey, I'm still in this in some way.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, how did it make you feel? What were your thoughts? Were you comforted? Were you scared? What were your thoughts?
Well, it was definitely not scary. I felt instantly comforted, but so overwhelmed emotionally that I cried the whole way home, and I couldn't even wait to get home to tell my brother what had happened. I had to call him on the way back. There's just this sense of urgency of, I have to share this story.
I think that is so cool. I think that's so cool. And I think it's very cool you went over to the virtual campfire. My associate producer and assistant, Maddie, found you over there, and she asked you to come over and share the story on the campfire. So, folks, if you've not tested it out, almost everybody's on Facebook these days. Go over there and look for Jim Harold's virtual campfire, absolutely free, and people like Allison tell great stories like this one, sweet and spooky ones too. Allison, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by HelloFresh. They are the meal delivery service that is the best. I love them. We're customers, and I really, really enjoy what they do. And I've teamed up with HelloFresh, and they're offering everyone in the Campfire audience $30 off your first week of deliveries when you go to HelloFresh.com. That's HelloFresh.com, and use the offer code Campfire30. It's a great time to start with HelloFresh because I think we're all trying to eat more healthily going into the new year, but you're so busy. A lot of times you have two people working in the family, two spouses working in the family, and or maybe you're single and you're on the go, but you still want to have home cooked food. I mean, HelloFresh is the answer. Convenience. You basically choose your delivery day that works for you, and you can even pause for weeks when you're out of town and those kind of things. And everything comes pre-measured in labeled meal kits, so you know which ingredients go with what recipe. And then there's selection and flexibility. They offer a wide variety of chef-curated recipes that change weekly. Absolutely delicious. There's 3 plans to choose from: the classic, the veggie, and the family. And I think that you will absolutely enjoy what they do. Now, I love HelloFresh meals. It's kind of like, you're getting home cooking, but they really are, to me, it's like eating in a fine restaurant. They're really delicious. One of my favorites, and I guess I'm not alone, this week we had the meatloaf balsamico, and it is in their Hall of Fame. It's meatloaf balsamico with sweet potato mash and green beans. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. And the nice thing is you can have a great meal like this Hall of Fame meal, but you won't spend all night in the kitchen because recipes only take around 30 minutes to cook. And for me, it's exciting because I am not a great cook, but making this, I feel confident with the simple recipes that are outlined and pictured on step-by-step instruction cards. I got to tell you, I love HelloFresh. I am a customer. HelloFresh is delicious. I love it. My wife loves it. My kids love it. You'll love it too. So what you need to do now is go to HelloFresh.com and use that coupon code Campfire30 to get $30 off your first week of deliveries. That is HelloFresh.com, and use the code Campfire30 to get $30 off your first week of deliveries. Give it a try, because I know you'll try it and you'll say, Jim was right. HelloFresh is great. I love it. Thanks, HelloFresh.
Now back to Jim Harold's Campfire.
Matt is on the line from the UK via Skype, and he was with us a couple of times a few months ago, and he told one of the best campfire stories ever about a rock and roll ghost. And I'm sure that the one that he has for us today is going to be equally fascinating, and this is one that I suppose happened to a friend of his. Matt, welcome back to the program, and boy, if this is anything like those other stories you told us, also the one about the ghost of the underground, I can't wait, so tell us what happened.
Hello, Jim. Yes, well, this is actually a story a friend of mine told me 2 months ago when I was visiting them up in... It's quite an ancient kind of spooky area up in North Yorkshire, near a place just below Whitby, which is where Dracula was thought up and written, and a place called Robin Hood's Bay. And this story happened, I think it was only about a year ago, and it spooked me out when I heard it. So here goes. It was basically a friend of mine, Sam, and her husband Luke, and the eldest daughter Tabitha were at the house, the Red House, which is their place, the big old doctor's house from the turn of the century. And they were in the kitchen having a conversation, and it was this kind of time of year, so it was September time, night time. Mm-hmm. Having a conversation that wasn't really going in Sam's favour, and she said to me, she felt that it was getting a bit heated, and they were she felt she'd been a little bit pecked at. So in a fit of frustration and a bit of anger, she picked up her car keys, left the house, said, right, I'm I'm going to go for a drive. Wasn't quite sure where she was going to go. It was a dark, black night, very crisp out. A very clear night. You could see the stars, and she got in her car, drove out of the village, which is up a very, very steep hill that takes you onto the North Yorkshire moors. And as she reached the top of the moors, she noticed there was a very low mist, a very low white mist, which wouldn't be too unusual, but so it's very Sherlock Holmes-like. And so she drove through it. And she was coming up to a T-junction, and she was going to turn left, which would have taken her to Scarborough. And up on the moors, it's very, very just full of gorse, and it's very, very vast and quite. It's got quite an atmosphere up there. I've been up there myself. It's a very, very, very spooky place. Now, as she's driving towards the T-junction, there is a lay-by on the left, a very shallow kind of lay-by, just almost like a gravel thing, really, not really tarmacked or anything, that goes into the gorse land and the moorland. And as she was coming up to the T-junction, she noticed within in the lay-by was a 1950s split-screen Volkswagen camper van.
Mm-hmm.
With the mother and the father were at the back of the van, and to the side of the van facing the road, directly kind of on the edge of the road, were two children, a boy and a girl, sitting in very, very old deck chairs, high back deck chairs, spring-loaded ones that would have had like a canvas pinstriped covering. So very old yet again. And this was happening very quickly because she was driving towards the T-junction. But she was in quite, still kind of quite angry from this conversation she had in the kitchen. So she was kind of cooling down a little bit. And she noticed as she was coming up that it didn't really register at the time because she was kind of still kind of angry. But bearing in mind it was, like a clear night but black, this the camper van and the family were lit up as if by a spot like above them, and they had clothes you'd wear in the daytime, and this was now about 1:45 midnight.
Wow.
Really, really strange, but you can imagine this thing was happening quite quick as she was driving past. She said the girl sitting by the side of the road was swinging her legs and looked sort of between 6 and 7 years old. She said, but this is where it gets a bit spooky, really. But the boy was slightly facing her car, as she came along, and as she drove parallel with the boy, she said it was. She saw his face, and she said it was the face of evil. And I said, in what way? She said, he was grinning the most evil grin and staring straight at me in, I don't know if you remember the plasticine puppets that I think they did quite well in the States, called Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely.
They've got the big, weird, teethy grin. He had a mouth like that, almost.
Huh.
Very full of teeth. Really strange. And she thought, oh, and she looked at him again. He was still staring at her. She got to the T-junction. I mean, bear in mind, this was all happening within seconds. She got to the T-junction, thought, I don't feel right. She decided not to turn left to Scarborough and thought she better get back. She thought that she shouldn't be out here. This is spooky. And she thought, who on earth would be by the side of the road at nearly midnight in clothes you'd wear during the day in a cold September night? And why were they dressed in kind of period clothes from the 1950s? Because she said that the mother was really, really well turned out, really neat hair, very, very. They didn't look like they'd broken down. It looked like they'd got their chairs out. Occasionally, you'd see that in the UK around summertime. You'd see people would pull over in a lay-by and get deck chairs out and have like a flask of tea. Some people just to have a break on the way on a long journey somewhere, and it kind of looked a bit like that. But of course, very, very strange at midnight. As she turned round to look at them, there was no one there. It was pitch black, nothing. So
was it a ghost van, or I think you guys would call it a caravan? That's spooky.
Yeah, there's nothing there, and it was there for it was there for long enough for Sam to study the camper van and the chairs and take in all of the details. But she said it was only then that it dawned on her that how on earth was this scene lit up? Because there are no buildings up on the moors. There's no like petrol station. There isn't anything for a long way. I've driven there up there myself, visited them, and I've sort of turned up in the evening, and it's other than your car headlights, there is absolutely nothing in sight to light anything up. But she was quite, as you can imagine, she was quite spooked by this. To sort of look over her shoulder to check what was going on and see that there was absolutely nothing there, nothing in the lay-by, just pitch black. So you can imagine she drove home quick, got back to the Red House, and Luke and Tabitha, as she got into the kitchen, they said to her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Not really." And Luke said, "It looks like you've just seen a ghost." And she said, "I think I have." So there you go.
Yeah,
that's my story. That's her story. So
well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us once again. I do appreciate it. Yet another great story. I know you have another one, and hope we can connect with you another time to share that one. But
sure.
What a fantastic story! You always deliver the goods, as they say. Thanks, thanks so much, Matt.
Pleasure.
Crystal is on the line from the great state of Utah. I got to say, it's beautiful out there. I was out there about, 15 or 16 years ago, and I was just blown away by just the scenic beauty. What a great place. But then, nevertheless, Crystal is here to tell us her story, and this is quite a story. Crystal, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us, and tell us what happened.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited. So this actually is something that happened to my son, but, so his dad, my son is 7 now, he's almost 8, but his dad passed away from brain cancer when my son was about 2.5.
Oh.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah. But a couple weeks after, actually, I should backtrack a little bit. So before his dad got sick, he used to love playing golf. And whenever he had any free time, that was pretty much what he was doing. And whenever he would finish playing golf, he'd come home and he'd say, "Oh, I can't wait till Ryder is old enough for me to teach him how to play golf." And it was something he always wanted to do. But he never got that chance because then he got sick and then he passed away. And so a couple weeks after he passed away, I went into Ryder's room, and every morning I asked him how he slept and if he had good dreams and stuff. And I went into his room and I asked him how he slept and if he had good dreams. And he said, "Yeah, I went golfing with Daddy." And I was like, "Oh, you did?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow, that's awesome." And the thing is, though, that at that point, Ryder, he was only 2.5 when his dad passed away. He had no clue what golf was. Or, he didn't know that was something that his dad was really into when he was healthy. And he never knew that was anything that his dad wanted to teach him. And so I personally believe that is a way that our loved ones that have passed on can visit us, is through our dreams. And so I think that was his dad's way of getting to experience that with him, since he didn't get to in life. Yeah.
Wow, that is such a great story. I got to say that, and very touching. And That's just a neat story, and I really hope that they did get to go golfing. That is so cool. Now, that was a pretty short story. I know you have a story about someone named Zachary. Do you want to tell us that story?
Yeah. So at this point, this is another one concerning Ryder. Ryder seems to have a strong connection with the other side, apparently, because a lot of things he's experienced a lot of stuff. But so he was probably 3 at this point, maybe close to 4. But I was up early one morning getting ready for work, and Ryder came into my room, and he said, Zachary woke me up. He keeps scaring me. And I was like, who's Zachary? And I thought, because he was in daycare at the time, and I thought maybe it was just a kid from his daycare or something. And I was like, who's Zachary? And he's like, he's the boy in my room. And I was like, what boy in your room? And he said that this kid Zachary was running around his room scaring him, and that he woke him up by slapping him on the arm. And I remembered it, but I didn't make a big deal out of it because I don't want to scare him or anything. But I made a point to ask the daycare director when I took him to daycare if there was anyone in his class named Zachary. And she was like, no, there's not anyone named Zachary in our daycare, period. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And also, I know you have kids, and so I'm sure you remember, there's they go through stages of just watching the same movie over and over and over. Yeah. So he was in that stage, and I know, the movie that he was watching at the time, or maybe the couple movies he was watching at the time, there were no characters named Zachary. There was no mention of the name Zachary. He didn't personally, neither of us knew anybody named Zachary or Zach or anything like that. So as far as he was concerned, he had never heard that name before. And so that was the first morning. The next day, he woke me up, or he didn't wake me up, he woke up, told me the same thing. He's like, Zachary keeps running around my room. He's scaring me. And I was like, just kind of more to humor Ryder. I was like, Zachary, go away. And then I was like, there, he's gone. And we pretty much just left it at that, went to work, did our day. Night, as I was tucking Ryder into bed, so his bed used to be really low to the ground because he was still pretty small.
Right.
And I was leaning over to give him a hug and kiss, and he was like, Zachary's still here. And I was like, Zachary, go away. And then I was like, there, he's gone. And then I leaned over again, and he's like, he's still here. And I was like, where is he? And he said, he's sitting behind you on the floor. And I was like, oh no. And I turned around. Of course, I didn't see anything. But I've always heard that, if you command whatever, that they can't be here, or, that they need to leave, that works, usually. So I said, okay, Zachary, you need to leave us alone. You are not allowed to be here anymore. And after that, Ryder never mentioned Zachary again. But it was funny, though, because the first morning that he told me about Zachary, I forgot to mention this before, but I was asking him about it, and I was like, well, what, is Zachary big like Mommy, or is he little like you? And he's like, he's little like me. And I was like, what color hair does he have? And he's like, yellow. So he, knew details about what this kid looked like.
Right.
So apparently it was a blonde little kid, and unfortunately, and we lived in an apartment at the time, and unfortunately I didn't ever look into it to see if maybe any past residents named or had a kid named Zachary that lived there that passed away, or I never did research, but I thought it was pretty crazy.
Well, it seems like he definitely has a connection. It's very interesting how the very young ones have this connection that I think that we outgrow when we get older, unfortunately. Crystal, she has 2 more stories for us. Tell us about your son's connections here. It seems pretty remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, he definitely seems to have a strong connection with the other side. Talked about this boy that he was seeing in his room named Zachary. Before that experience, though, he actually had another encounter with someone in his room named Jason. And this started around the same time, just maybe a few weeks before the whole Zachary thing. But one morning, I woke up to Ryder screaming bloody murder. I ran into his room. He was sitting up in bed. His face was red. He had tears streaming down his eyes. His eyes were wide open. And he was like, he kept saying, Jesus is trying to get me. Jesus is trying to get me. And he was just hysterical. And I was like, what? Jesus? And I was confused. And so I figured he just had some kind of bad dream. I calmed him down, and we didn't talk about it anymore. The next morning, he woke up exactly the same way, screaming his head off, eyes wide open, face red, hysterical. And he was saying the same thing. He was like, Jesus is trying to get me. He's coming through my window. And I was like, Jesus, no. And again, I just like calmed him down, and we went on with our day. The next morning, it was the third morning, the exact same thing. Like word for word, Jesus is trying to get me. He's trying to come into my window. And finally I was like, Jesus? I was like, no, Jesus is nice. He loves us. And at that point in time, so he was about 3, I had never like sat down with him and really talked to him about God and Jesus and like ever even showed him a picture of like, oh, this is what Jesus looks like or anything. So I got a picture of Jesus, and I was like, this is Jesus. He's nice. And he looked at it, and he got really perplexed look on his face. And he's like, Jesus is not Jason? And I was like, who's Jason? Because we didn't know anyone named Jason. And I guess he saw my face change, like a confused look. And he was like, Jason is trying to get me. So I don't know if maybe he was just getting the names like Jason and Jesus mixed up. I don't know. But so, and he was like, Jason is coming through the window. And then he lifted up his pant leg and pointed to his knee. He was like, Jason put black on me. And I was like, what the heck? Like it sounds like something is like marking my kid. And we lived on the 3rd floor of our apartment building. So it's not like someone could just crawl through his window. And he was just hysterical. And he was like, Jason wants me. And I managed to like get him calmed down finally. And then later on, after he had kind of like forgotten about it, I asked him just casually, I was like, hey Ryder, where's Jason? And he's like, he's outside. And I was like, what's he doing? And he was like, he's getting out of the dirt. And I was like, oh my gosh, that freaked me out. And I didn't say anything else. Like I didn't mention Jason again after that. And but I did the same thing like I did with the whole Zachary thing. I said, I did like, Jason, you need to go away. Leave Ryder. You cannot be here. And then things seemed to stop with that. And then a few weeks later, Zachary came to visit. But yeah, that was really, really freaky.
Yeah, that is something else to say for sure. He seems like a very, very psychically sensitive young man. And then you had one last story that you shared with us in the email. Can you tell us that?
Sure. So I have a really good friend who, a few years ago, her and her husband were having a really hard time not getting pregnant, but staying pregnant. She had a few really hard miscarriages. I know one was pretty late into her pregnancy, and it was pretty traumatic for them. And she owns a soap shop in California, and we went to go visit her one day. And this was, I don't know exactly how much time had passed since her last miscarriage, but a little bit of time had passed. And Ryder just went up to her. And I think this was like only the first or second time he had ever met her. And he was 4 at the time. And he put his hand on her stomach and he said, there's a baby in your belly. And she's like, oh no, I wish. And then she mouthed to me, she's like, I had a miscarriage. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. A couple days later, she called me and she's like, oh my gosh, Crystal, Ryder called it. I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. So now she has I believe she's 2 or 3 years old. She has a daughter. Last year, she got pregnant again. And she jokingly told me, she's like, hey, since Ryder predicted last time, like ask him what the sex of the baby is going to be. And this was the day before she was going to find out. And so I just asked her, I was like, hey, I was like, what's Stray's baby in her belly? What is it, a boy or a girl? And like, he's like, a boy. And I was like, okay. I was like, and I told her, I was like, he says it's a boy. And the next day she called me, she's like, guess what? I'm having a boy. So now she's got a little girl and a little boy, and he was predicted both of them.
Oh, that's so cool. And so cool for them that everything worked out. But that's really neat story. It's nice to end it on a happy note. Well, Crystal, thank you so much. I will ask you this. How old is he now?
He is 7. He'll be 8. October 21st.
Is this something that seems to be continuing, or is it something that that's kind of stopped as he's gotten older?
Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it seems to have slowed down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But,
interesting.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's something that he's just probably growing out of. That you grow out of as you get older. So.
Well, we are so glad you were able to share these stories with us tonight. Thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The Campfire is brought to you by the Campfire Cruise. Join me in the summer of 2018, this summer, on a cruise full of ghost stories, a live campfire podcast recording, and a whole lot of fun. And you can get all the details at campfirecruise.com. That's campfirecruise.com. Now, in November, we just had our Mysteries Cruise, and I got to tell you, that was so much fun. And I think what was the most fun, I loved recording live podcasts, and maybe you heard those, and that was a lot of fun. And then also just sitting around with the other cruisers, the listeners, and talking to them about their own personal stories of the strange and paranormal topics and all of that. It was just so much fun. And then you layer on top of that the fun of a cruise. Now, this is going to be July 30th to August 3rd, 2018 on the Mariner of the Seas. And we're going to be sailing to the Bahamas. And they're actually redoing Mariner of the Seas, Royal Caribbean. So it is so cool. We're going to be on a boat that's not technically new, but it's going to be like new because they're going to redo the whole thing just, I think, a month or two before we actually sail. So that is going to be great. And we're going to have an excursion, a shore excursion at Nassau. And that was so much fun. At the Mysteries Cruise, actually, for that, we went to the Dominican Republic, and the fellowship and the meal and the good time that I had with the other cruisers. And the thing about being with these cruisers now, when I see them pop up in my timeline, hey, Irene, hey, Brianna, hi, Jeff, it's one of those cases where it's really, they're friends now. They're not listeners, they're friends. And it was just really great. And I think that that's something that I'm going to remember and it's going to stick with me a long, long time. So I'm sure in these cold winter months, we're having this big cold spell through most of the year. You're thinking, what am I going to do this summer? What am I going to have for my vacation? Why not consider the Campfire Cruise? Now, I'd love to meet you. They're going to keep the size of the group small, so it can be very intimate. I will be having dinner with the various cruisers. I'll be rotating through tables every night, so we'll get to talk with each other. And that was really a great part of the Mysteries Cruise. I enjoyed it, and I think the Campfire Cruise is even going to be more fun. So, again, July 30th to August 3rd, 2018, the Mariner of the Seas, and we're going to sail to the Bahamas. We're going to do a live podcast recording. We're going to have sessions, presentations, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. And now you can save $50 per person. So check it out, campfirecruise.com, campfirecruise.com. I hope to see you there. The great people at Holiday Maker Travel are making this possible, and we thank Mike and Wendy over there. And also, I just encourage you to go to campfirecruise.com because now is the time to reserve your cabin, and now is the time to make your plans for your summer vacation. Why not go on something truly unique, something like a Campfire Cruise? Campfirecruise.com. We thank you so much, and we thank Holiday Maker Travel. I hope you'll join me and we'll sail away.
Now back to Jim Harold's Campfire.
Jennifer's on the line from Arkansas. She said she listened to us for quite a while on the various shows, and had a little phone problem and took her about a year to get hooked back up with our shows, but she did. She persevered, and she's back, and I'm so glad she is. And she's calling from Arkansas tonight, and she has one of our favorite kind of stories, and I wish we get more of these. And if you have one of these, I hope you'll call in with it. Very strange UFO story, and then some other strange things that went on. Jennifer, welcome to the show, and tell us what happened.
All right, thank you. Well, I think it's been about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. I was out in my backyard smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden, this bright light was shining down from over the trees, and it probably wasn't as close to me as what I can remember it because I got so excited, but it seemed like it was not far over the tree line, and it was just hovering over my house, and it was bigger than my house. And I freaked out and started back up the stairs to go back in, and to get my two youngest sons, and my husband up. And I finally got my youngest son out there, and he was watching, and he just kind of looked at it, and he said, "Yeah, it's military." But I mean, it was just over the house, and then it would dart towards the north, then it would go back to the south, and then east, west, and it would change shapes. It would go from a triangle to a rectangle, and then it would be like two circles, and it had green, red, white, and yellow lights on, and blue lights on.
Wow.
Well, then, yeah, I finally got my husband out there, and he was complaining. You know, he come out in his shorts and having shoes on, and he was going to say, "Well, I'm going to have to go back in and get my shoes on." And he got to, "I'm going to have to go," and he looked up and dropped the F-bomb. He said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know." But across the street is the volunteer fire department where we lived at the time, and ambulance had just gotten back from a run, and the EMT and the drivers were standing out there, and then a police officer come up, and they all took off following it. It went down like northeast of town, and so my husband followed it, and I got my other son up, and as we were walking across the yard to go to Main Street, there was people, starting to stop on the on Main Street and look. It was shaped like a stingray. It made absolutely no noise, and it was huge. It was dark, and it was illuminated. It wasn't that I saw any, individual lights. It was just yellow, and it was going really slow, and it was just kind of passing over. And then the EMTs, and then a police officer, and then my husband came back, and we went out on Main Street and joined them, and we counted 27 of those stingray shapes.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever. Yeah. I can't describe the feeling that I had. It wasn't that I was afraid. It was, I could only speak one word at a time. I couldn't put together sentences. It was something, I was somehow changed or something. It was, something had scattered my brain. But, and it was just like, it was so unreal. Nobody was really saying, but I do remember I had been looking at this police officer, and he said, "Well, we're in a flight. This could be like a flight pattern." And the policeman just looked at him. He said, "Well, yeah, we're that's where we are, but that's not an airplane." and besides, it's flying way too low. And I asked him if he was going to report it, and he said, "No, I want to keep my job."
Interesting.
And then he said that, he had seen things in the area. He'd always worked overnight as a cop, and he had seen things in the area that still would make the hair on the back of his neck stand up. But I don't know if it was military. I don't know what it was, but whatever I saw first was being chased by those 27 airships.
The thing is that it sounds very much like, to me, almost like triangular, almost like, not exactly, but like triangular UFOs. And I was reminded of a specific sighting, and this is years ago because the person I'm going to talk about passed a long time ago. But if you remember Peter Jennings, the former ABC anchor, and before he got ill, one of the last shows he did was on UFOs. And he talked about a triangular UFO I can't remember if it was Phoenix Lights or it was another sighting, but about a police officer who saw a triangular type aircraft flying very low, absolutely silent. And even though you're more of a stingray, which is not quite a triangle, but it just reminded me of that. And I do wonder, I think it's definitely something. I thought that was a really interesting remark by the police officer. He didn't want to lose his job. Yeah. but I do wonder. Go ahead.
There's a database online. I can't remember what the website's name is, but you can go in and just list your sightings. It's just all user. Nobody modifies it or anything. And it was probably 2 years before I would go in there trying to see if anybody in my area or, close by had seen anything like that. And it was about 2 years before anybody started admitting to it or reporting it. But the day after that happened, I'd forgotten this. I went up to a local convenience store, and there was this silver, one of those Airstream vehicles.
Yes.
And it had UFO hunters on the side of it.
Oh, that's interesting. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a funny. I actually interviewed today, and I believe that's the same show, Bill Burns, who used to be the host of UFO Hunters.
Oh, wow.
This morning. So isn't that kind of a weird coincidence, Jennifer? I thought that's kind of strange.
What do you think they are?
What do I think they are? Well, I think there's two possibilities. I think it could be alien, or I think it could be military. I mean, you're citing.
I think there's a third possibility.
Okay, tell us what they are.
Angels, spiritual.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm a Christian, and I believe in the Bible, and the Bible says that there are spiritual wars going on all around us that we don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you will go back and read some of the books that were kicked out of our Bible a long time ago, like the Book of Enoch, it would blow your mind.
Interesting. I love the idea that you've got other things in mind, because I think we do always fall into the same old explanations, And the website you were talking about, it's Peter Davenport has the site, the National UFO Reporting Center. I bet that's the one you were talking about.
That sounds.
Yeah.
But, I was looking for YouTube videos. I drew a picture of it because I didn't even have enough thought process to take a picture of it with my phone, and I had my phone in my hand the whole time.
Now, are you on our virtual campfire group page on Facebook?
Well, yes, I think I am. I know that I've visited there.
Say again. I'm sorry.
I've visited your Facebook.
Oh, great.
I'm sure I joined.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is when this comes out, we'd love it if you still have that picture, if you could snap a photo of it and post it there so people could see it.
I think I do. I back up all my pictures in Photo Bucket because I took a picture of the pictures that I drew.
Excellent. Well, Jennifer, a very cool story. I would love for people to follow your example if they have UFO sightings, because Campfire is about stories of the strange. Now, many people think, it's just ghost stories, and that's certainly a huge part of it. But it's the head scratchers, it's the UFO sightings, it's the cryptid sightings.
I think people
it's so
are
much
ashamed
more.
of it. I think that people will think they're crazy, but I think it's crazy to believe that we know everything, because we don't.
That's
we don't know
exactly right. That's one of the smartest statements I've ever heard on the show. I think it's crazy to think that we know everything. You're absolutely right, and I agree with you. I think people, when they see UFO, if somebody sees a ghost, I think it's more accepted these days to say I saw a ghost or had an experience. I think when you say I saw a UFO, people go, woo, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, maybe it's their terminology.
And it's unfortunate because, for example, former President Carter saw a UFO, and he became the highest politician in the country. I mean, the thing is that I believe that people see things in the sky, and what they are, I'm not sure, but it's interesting to think about the possibilities. Jennifer, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're so welcome, and thank you for calling.
We have a return caller. Angela is back on the line from my home state, Ohio. But anyhow, Angela is going to tell us, she has a couple of short paranormal stories around the woods. And also, she says she has some insight for us. She's a hunter and has some insight on Bigfoot sightings, she feels. Angela, welcome to the program. And I guess maybe we ought to start off with your spooky stories first.
Sure, absolutely. I am been a deer hunter for all of my life, and I was deer hunting down in Wayne National Forest, and there is a park called Brush Creek State Park. They do have a ranger station, and I was hunting directly behind the ranger station on top of the backside of this hillside where there's a clear cut in the middle. It's a log cut. And I was sitting in the middle of the clear cut with a blind and was sitting in the blind waiting for deer to pop out on either side. And what I experienced was I suddenly experienced a presence around my blind. I could feel that it was a male presence. And I saw this face looking in at me. It was obviously not a living person. It was very skeletal in nature. It did have some skin on his face, but it was very gray and it looked ripped up. His eye sockets were glowing, and he was somehow talking to me. He explained to me, and of course, he explained to me that about 100 years prior, he had been tied to the saddle horn of a horse, and two men had killed him. They had him to death by dragging him behind a horse. Now, where this place is it's an abandoned stone quarry where I was hunting. That hillside used to be a stone quarry 100 years ago, so I could imagine, I know somebody, getting away with that and hiding a body. He even told me where he is buried. But the whole time, he was just harassing me. He was, like growling, hissing. He would appear in one window and suddenly appear in another window. He was calling me all sorts of, horrible names, and just to harass me, just to try to scare me. He apparently had nothing better to do on the hillside to try to scare hunters. But I stuck it out, and I stood there because I wanted a deer. I just wanted a deer that bad. And I hadn't seen anything all season. But when I packed up and I left, it wasn't maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I was speaking with other deer hunters around the office, and without me saying anything to anybody about sharing this experience, one of the other deer hunters said the same thing happened to him, hunting that same clear cut, where this being that looked like a rotten zombie appeared to him and was harassing him on the edge of the clear cut. And this deer hunter was so scared, he didn't leave because not he wanted deer, because he was too terrified to leave. And on that same hillside, just further up, I had a deer stand in a tree, and it was extremely cold weather. It was 15 degrees was the high that day. And I looked down, and I was suddenly, in my vision, was somebody standing against a tree, but in jeans and T-shirt. But they were just brown. There wasn't any facial features. The face area was just flat, and they were just casually had their arms crossed leaning against a tree, which seemed impossible for me for them to suddenly appear because I'd been scanning the whole hillside looking for deer that may be coming down the trails. I didn't hear him approach. I should have heard him approach because the leaves were frozen, and he wasn't dressed for the weather. He was dressed for summer weather. And no way you'd be out there in the jeans and T-shirts and leaning against a tree. And then he moved very casually and just walked behind a tree and disappeared behind a tree. When I got out of my stand and I walked it was only 30 yards from me, so I should have been able to see every detail of the face, but he had no face. And I stood behind the tree he disappeared behind and did not emerge from the backside of, and it could not even hide me. And I'm a size 0. So I know a tree should be able to hide me, but I couldn't even hide. It was so thin. And I had a very similar experience at Salt Fork State Park on the north end of the lake, hunting the public hunting lands, and I was turkey hunting. And I saw a shadow person leaning against a tree, only he looked brown, but he was dated from, I would say, the 1950s, because he was wearing clothes that hunters typically would have worn in the 50s and 60s, where they would have a heavy hat with the air flaps, a heavy jacket, and a heavy plaid shirt with jeans, heavy jeans rolled up with boots that are about ankle high. And he was just leaning against the tree looking at me, and he was just brown. And I was wondering why, people were out here with guns. Why isn't he wearing his bright orange jacket that you would normally take precautions for when you're in the woods? Because you need that bright orange vest to be seen by gun hunters, just to let them know that you're a person, not a deer. And he stared at me for a long time, and he had no face. It was just a flat area.
Oh, my.
And this was near a abandoned homestead that has other phenomenon with it, like auditory phenomena. My dad was out there and heard disembodied voices of people around him in his deer stand. And they were just floating in the air around him, the voices were, and he just like they were standing next to him. Very strange. And he likes to hunt about 30 feet off the ground, so, people can't be up that high. But, yes, this person was standing there. He had no face. It was just flat. And he just very casually, stood up and disappeared behind the tree, just like the other person did at Brush Creek. And I again paced it off, and this time it was a little bit closer, about 20 yards. And I stood behind the tree, and again, the tree couldn't cover me, and he never reemerged from the backside of this tree. And there's been other apparitions in the same area at Salt Fork. My mother had seen an apparition of an entire family sitting down for dinner. And she said they weren't moving, but you could hear the sound of plates being passed around.
Huh.
And she could see the food, and it was it looked like from the 1930s for her, judging by the clothing and the plates they had out and the silverware they had out. It looked everything to be from about the 1930s. So very interesting. I've also seen orbs out in that direction as well. I even had one orb, a red orb, free-floating orb, approach me while I was hunting and just stop like it was looking at me and then pulse briefly, and then it just continued on its track. And that was in sub-freezing weather, so I knew it wasn't an insect. I've had all sorts of strange things in the woods. I haven't seen Bigfoot, but I do have some insight as a deer hunter. The common mistakes that people would make or think that would be Bigfoot, particularly when it comes to sounds in the woods.
Right.
For example, they talk about screams. Well, there are so many animals that scream out there, particularly owls. All species of owls. In Ohio, we have the barred owl, the saw-whet owl, the screech owl, even the great horned owl. All these owls, just before daylight, and even the barn owl will do it, is they'll scream as their first hoot of the night. The first call is always a scream. Do you want to let other owls know that this is where they are? So I have been in a tree stand and heard the scream, and you swear it's somebody being killed, but I look up on the branch above me and see there's an owl sitting on my head. I've had that experience a few times. It startles you when you're in the dark, but it does turn out to be an owl at times. Also, rabbits, when they're being attacked by a coyote or a fox, they will also scream. Raccoons will scream. There are, and even bobcats. Well, bobcats, we don't have bobcats here, but we certainly have, we certainly have bobcats here, but let's say lynx. Bobcats and lynx both, they do make a screaming sound. And particularly the bobcats in Ohio, during the mating season, the males will sing, and sometimes that will go into a high pitch, and that could be mistaken for a person or hominid out there because it sounds human, but it's really a bobcat. So there are many auditory phenomena that happens in the woods that just occur naturally that people seem to think is Bigfoot when it's really not. It's not really proof of anything. It's just a proof that an animal is there. Also, when it comes to trees and bends in the trees, people have often mistaken for the little natural archways that form in the brush piles in the greenbrier and think that Bigfoot made a tunnel in there.
Oh.
Often the greenbrier will just bend on its own, and little deer will frequently tunnel through the greenbrier and to make their beds in there, and also to get to trail whatever food sources that they're getting to. And it's not something that can be attributed to Bigfoot, but definitely white-tailed deer will carry on and tunnel through.
Mm-hmm.
Also, people have said that they find like nests and different things in the woods. Well, I know as deer hunters and just outdoor enthusiasts, you will sometimes build emergency shelters out there. I've done that to get out of the wind when all of a sudden I'm on the hillside. It's a complete whiteout. It's blizzard conditions. You can't see anything. You can't light a match in high winds, obviously, if you're trying to build a fire to keep warm. But you do have to get to shelter quickly and have to make your own out there. And I've done that before. Duck hunters will make their own blind. Deer hunters will also build their natural blind to camouflage themselves. So, it's not necessarily proof of Bigfoot, but that person typically would do that in order to either camouflage themselves to be better hunters, or just to get out of the wind or the rain of the weather in a situation where the weather has changed abruptly and they need to get quickly and get shelter quickly.
Well, go ahead. Yeah? Go ahead.
I was also going to mention tracks as well. I've seen evidence of black bear here in Ohio. Their prints can be confused with a big footprint. And, of course, you can tell by the claws on the end of the toes. But if that track is a little bit old and it's fall apart, it can look like it belonged to a very large person or a very large Bigfoot. Also, people have told me they see these little Bigfoots out, and they look at it, and it turns out to be a raccoon track. Because raccoons, their feet are somewhat similar to ours, especially the back feet, and it looks like a foot of a child, but it's really a raccoon footprint.
Well, very interesting insight from a hunter. So, folks, keep that in mind when you're hearing of Bigfoot reports. Maybe you have some possible explanations there. And thank you for sharing your own stories, Angela, and for coming back on the campfire. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I sure appreciate you having me on and listening to me and sharing that insight. So when people are in the woods, that I hope they would be more educated about the wildlife out there, the sounds and sights that they experience. It's a wonderful place to be out there and to enjoy the wilderness, but certainly keep in mind that what is around you, if you don't have proof of it, if you can't see it yourself or you don't have film of it, it may not be what you think. It could be just simply an animal out there that's supposed to be out there that is not a cryptid, like a white-tailed deer or a big cat, or perhaps another person out there.
Well, there you go. Well, thanks a lot, Angela.
Sure, no problem.
That was a great campfire show. Thank you to all of our storytellers, and we have a great 2018 coming up. We thank you so much for tuning in. Please tell a friend. Make sure you subscribe in Apple Podcast if you're on the iPhone or the iPad. That is so important to build us up in the charts and keep the campfire love going, and we'd appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you on the campfire, and as always, stay spooky.
You've been listening to Jim Harold's Campfire. Tune in again next time for more stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things.